We'll start shortly. Hello, my name is Andre Cohen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We're going to spend a little bit of time kind of setting ground rules for these conversations that we'll have on Fridays, and really excited to have all of you both in the Zoom call, those who are calling in on the phone, as well as those who will see this as a replay. I'll talk a little bit about me in just a second, because I'm less important than the conversations that we want to have. And so this is a kind of an open forum Zoom meeting. I want to address our members and their concerns and their questions and do some education in this time so that folks feel really prepared to tackle a lot of the challenges that are in front of us. So before we get to kind of introductions and talking about that stuff, there are a few things I just kind of want to go over. One is that this is a community conversation. So if you have friends who want to know more about mediation, this might be a great place for them to come and join and have these conversations. We'll be having these at noon on Fridays, and we look forward to having folks engage in this process. I want to talk a little bit about me right now. I'm the sitting president for Conflict Resolution Minnesota, and I've been a mediator, a volunteer, a board member, chair mover, floor sweeper in this space, probably since about 2006 or 2007. So I've got a little bit of tenure in here. I did a majority of my practice and my volunteer work was with MCRS, so which is in Crystal. So a lot of restorative justice as well as conflict mediation with community members there. And so it looks like we have a couple of members here. I'm curious how you're in this space, what got you in this space, and if we could just take a couple of minutes to kind of address that. And is it Christine? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Christine, you want to talk a little bit about how you're in this space, why you're in this space, and a little bit about your practice?
Sure. I just like to stay connected with the community of mediators. I live in North Dakota and we don't have a community of mediators here, but I actually work as an ombudsman now in the university system. So yeah, so I'm using my skills in that way in the university setting.
That's interesting. I had a similar role at Anoka County, and worked with some friends in the 10th Judicial, I can't even say that, 10th Judicial District. So the role of an ombudsman is a powerful one, and I'm glad that you're using these skills to work in that space. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, and any way that we can be supportive and even networking in your space, we're more than happy to do that. So I want to go next to I think it's Donna, and Donna, how do you say your last name? Is it Lun or Loon?
Either way.
Oh no, there's a preference, right?
No preference.
No preference.
It's either way.
All right.
Yeah, I was just curious because I got the note. So I belong to a community mediation group here. So
where's here?
Rochester.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm also in Rochester. Yeah. So
and there's going to be a family mediation training coming up soon by CMM Or I get all your acronyms mixed up. You are CRM, there's CMM, and then there's,
CMRS, and yeah, so
yes. And then there's other mediation groups with different similar, let's put it this way, very similar acronyms.
yeah, so that's something that is that also kind of plagues our community a little bit, in trying to figure out how to do those, and then what makes us different, right? So what makes all these different acronyms different in the ways that they interact. So hopefully in the coming years we'll do a better job as a community helping folks be able to navigate that space. So well, I'm glad that you were curious, and I'm glad that you've come to kind of spend just a little bit of time with us, kind of holding conversations. And as we move forward, and as this community grows, we hope to also talk about skills, right? So best practices and those kinds of things. So, before we get into that, I do want to just share a little bit about kind of the ground rules or the expectations, or agreements. And so I like using both ground rules and agreements because they're both necessary, right? So when we decide to engage in a conversation with someone, we do have to have kind of some common ground. And this is one of those places I think is very interesting, particularly given where we are, given the murder of George Floyd, given the civil unrest that happened as a result of it, even in communities that are not directly tied to Minneapolis. We saw some effects of those things. The impact of the misinformation and disinformation about the COVID virus, the polarization in our society of the political system. No longer are you just allowed to have your opinion. Your opinion actually is evil in some people's eyes, right? Or your opinion is a life or death threat in some cases. So how do we even have conversations across these great chasms of differences and divides? And some of the tools that we hope to talk about and best practices we hope to give is really around really centering on two particular points. And this is where the ground rules and the agreements come into play, right? So there are goals that we should always have in any interaction that we have, particularly across differences, right? So we should focus on what are our goals for communication, what are our goals for interaction. The second part of that is there should be values that we uphold no matter what circumstance we're having this conversation in, or the nature of the conflict, right? So I have to be able to say within myself, even if the other person doesn't, there are actually some things I will not say. And in my case, I'm cisgendered. I'm married, I have 2 kids. And so I have to say there are certain things that no matter what happens between my spouse and I, there are words I will not utter to her. Right. And who polices that? So if I don't do it, or if I break that, who's policing that? I'm actually policing that. Right. So I've made an agreement to live up to certain kinds of values, to certain kinds of behaviors. And so when we think about even this conversation, the nature of ground rules is saying, you know what, these are the bottom line things that we will do with each other to have a productive conversation. And then these agreements are things that you are saying as you engage in this conversation stem from your values, right? And so it's important for us to be very focused on this notion of what is a value. And so again, just briefly, the ground rules and agreements that I'd like for us to engage in. One is focusing our attention on our goals. So what is the goal of this interaction? And the funny thing about that particular point is that have either of you or some of you on the call, have you been in conversations with someone who was actually not trying to have a conversation? They were just trying to prove a point. Right? Yeah. How effective was that conversation when it became clear that they're only trying to prove a point?
It's not a conversation then.
Not a conversation at all, right?
Right. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it becomes a court is what it becomes, right? And you become the interrogated, right? You know, where are you from? No, where are you really from? You're not asking that for information. You're trying to make a point. And what is the point when someone says something like that? Like, where are you really from? What's the point of that?
You don't belong here.
Yeah. You're an other.
Right.
What are you doing? And so in terms of communication, if we're not focused on what the goal of communication is, I actually want to draw people closer to me so I can understand a perspective that I don't understand. That if we're in conflict, maybe it's not about, maybe conflict is an illusion. Right? Maybe our conflict is an illusion and we're after very similar things, but we just have different ways of getting there, right? So we have to be mindful of the goals of our communication. The next thing is align our thoughts and our behaviors to our values, right? So I have not, even in some of these kind of radical antisocial groups, I've never really heard people have a value statement, like an official value statement, that was not supportive of them trying to get their needs met, right? And so our values are what drive us, and what at the core of human motivation, human desire. What do you think those core values are for all human beings?
I think things like to feel heard and understood, to be seen for who you are, those kinds of things.
Yeah. What else, Donna? What do you think are some core?
Safety.
Yeah.
Security.
Definitely. Right. So I subscribe to kind of some Adlerian, Alfred Adler, hence Adlerian psychology and philosophy. And what Adlerian psychology suggests is that human beings are after three things. They're after safety, significance, and belonging, right? And so, you know, in our conversation, we've hit all three of those, right? That people are looking for safety, significance, and belonging. So if now here, this is the part that's going to rattle our cages a little bit. So if I am a part of a neo-Nazi group, this is like the most, you know, extreme version of this that I could come up with, right? There may be some others, but I'll just use this as an example. What are they after through their behaviors?
They
Come
probably
on.
want the same things, right? They probably want to feel heard and understood, and I don't want to hear them.
Right?
Yeah.
So if they're after safety, if they're after significance, and they're after belonging, and I'm after safety, and I'm after significance, and I'm after belonging, where does the conflict lie?
In between us, inside us, with everybody. I don't know.
Within those methods,
Within the methods.
right? So they're after the same thing I'm after. We just have very different methods of getting those things, right? And so when we think about this notion of these ground rules, that we want to align our behaviors with our values, right? Have you ever been in a situation, and this just happened recently, where someone says something that they didn't mean to say, right? So I'm on a call, and someone says, you know what, the real problem with this thing we're doing is that we have too many Indians and not enough chiefs. Person said that on the call. And I paused. I paused, and this is in the middle of the meet. This is live Zoom, lots of people on the call. And I said, you know, it is okay to say that we have too many players and not enough coaches. And guess what the person said when I said that? I didn't mean to say that. I don't know where that came from. I know where it came from. You weren't concentrating on making sure that your behaviors and your values were aligned in that particular moment. And so now you have to be mindful, right? You have to be mindful. So, and that's just an obscure thing that happened. The other thing is engage in curiosity and not judgment. How do we know that we're being judged when we're in conversations with folks?
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah. So what are some clues that we're in a conversation with someone and they're actually not listening to us because they've already judged us? They've judged our point of view. They judged our phenotype, or they have some stereotype about us. What are some of those clues that we're actually not having a conversation, but someone is just being judgy?
I think what I notice, I mean, even just the way they're looking at you, you can kind of see it in their expression, like kind of maybe they're condescending in their tone, or they're frowning, or they're not really looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of see that they're thinking what they're going to say next, not focusing on you.
Right? So they've already made up their mind before you've even completed your thing. This is what I'm going to say next. And I'm just waiting. I'm playing hopscotch, or is it double dutch with the two ropes, right? Let me just jump in whenever they stop breathing, right? Donna, have you been in conversations like that where you've felt that the person you're talking to has already made up their mind?
Not for a long time.
Okay.
Not, you know, it could be that I come in as non-judgmental, so that kind of changes the vibe of the conversation. But
Yeah.
I don't go into big groups either. I either participate as a neutral, or I have, one-on-one conversations. I don't do big groups.
Okay. So one of and I'm glad you brought this notion, the notion of being a neutral into the conversation, because I remember I went into a mediation, and one of the parties had read an article about me and started talking about that article. And in my hubris and in my humanity, I entertained that. As a result, that was probably one of the most disastrous mediations that I did, because I should have taken myself out the equation, because one person felt very familiar with me where the other one didn't. So I was not a very good neutral. Right. And so that might be something also that is happening, that people can also see something in you that they said, I'm going to side with them on this. Right. So that's another part of that kind of judging, that I already know who this person is, so they're going to be on my side, or they're not going to be on my side. Right. The last couple of pieces I want to talk about, because I don't want to exhaust this too much, is also along with that judgment. It's easy for us to judge, right? Because we have reasons, but other people have excuses. Right? We have reasons for what we do, but they have excuses. And so we have to stay curious about those things so we can be open-minded to discover things together. And then we have to offer to people what we need from people, right? And so I need kindness. I need open communication. So I have to actually offer that if I expect to receive that, right? We model for people what it is that we would like to see or happen. And then lastly, we have to give people grace. So as eloquent as I might be in how I speak today, I've not always been that way. I've not always been as evolved in my thinking. And so I've had great mentors. I've had great parents and, community members that have given me feedback until I've gotten here. They gave me grace. They encouraged me. Have there ever been, and you don't have to, talk particularly about the thing, but have there been areas or behaviors that you've had that you've received grace until you were able to align that behavior with your intentions? Has that happened for either of you?
I think so. I think maybe sometimes in my professional life, kind of like you, having mentors who help you to kind of gently see where you went wrong and give you a chance to save face sometimes, or just get some clarity around it, or coach you kind of. Sometimes family, but at least for my family, it's more of a struggle there than to find that support.
Mm-hmm.
It's important though.
Mm-hmm. Donna? Have there been times where folks have given you grace until you, or even given you graceful feedback and said, Donna, you might want to?
I look back on my training, so I've evolved as I've advanced in training. So, and I look back and at the beginning of my training and I cringe. But, nobody said it was bad. Nobody said, it was good. It was just accepted. And then as I evolved, and then I say, oh my God, I did that, kind of thing. So I think that's an example of grace. So if I'm working as a trainer in a situation, I tend to, okay, somebody was okay with my stage of involvement. That's okay. So I go to, if they were willing to come to my stage of involvement, which was so kind and helpful. They were willing to speak to me on my level, you know, which was really kind. And then I can reflect now and went, oh, thank you. But it's like, oh my God.
And you know, those of us who have been given much have lots of responsibility to do the same for others, right? And so yeah, so yeah, I just laugh. So on Facebook, one of my early mentors is we're still connected, and she shares a lot of stuff with me, and I just laugh at thinking about the old days, right? And she was trying to get me to think certain ways or do certain things. And I was like, you're just old and you don't understand. This is how we do it these days, and all this kind of stuff. And now upon reflection, I'm just like, oh, but she stuck with me, and the fruits of her labor have paid off. And not only do I try to make her proud, but I try to use what she taught me in really effective ways and share those same things with other people, you know? So yeah, it's a gift that keeps on giving. And the other thing to recognize is that grace is not something that has to be earned. I give it because that's who I am, not because they have to do something, that they have to come up to some standards or whatever. But I say, you know what? I'm going to give them grace this time. One thing that I have learned over the years that's been very helpful to me is that oftentimes I will give grace to individual situations. So people get grace in individual situations. For example, the woman who's, you know, the person, it doesn't matter what their gender, the person that said, you know, the whole Indian comment, right? Grace. But if she says it 5 more times, that's a pattern. So you get grace, at least in my book, you get grace for first-time mistakes. You get grace for gaffes. But if I see a pattern, that's when I have to address a thing, right? So that's a common rule of thumb for me. And so any other thoughts about these ground rules? Is there anything you think we should add as we kind of look at or talk about these ground rules? Is there something that's missing in these agreements or these ground rules?
I can't think of anything I would add. I think that they're aspirational in some ways. I mean, not to be negative, but you know, it's hard when you're in the middle of conflict and maybe your fight or flight. It's hard to focus sometimes, or even sense your values pulling you in a direction.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. When you're in the middle of an emergency, no, here. How effective is it to pay for to buy insurance at the scene of an accident? So you just had an accident and now you want to buy some insurance. How effective is that going to be?
Too late.
Too late.
Yeah.
Right? When should we have insurance in case of an accident?
Long time before that.
Long time, right? And so to your point, these are aspirational. These are aspirational things, but having being in a conflict is probably the last time for me to get it's probably not the most optimal time to do some values clarification. It can happen there, but if I'm doing this in the middle of the conflict, it is going to muck up a whole lot of stuff. So these are things that I should probably do ahead of conflict, ahead of having these conversations. So when they happen, boom, I know what I'm doing. And I'm not talking about those, I'm talking about as mediators. This is this conversation right here. The context is mediators, right? So as a mediator, some of these things I should already be doing. I should be thinking, what are my hot buttons? What are my triggers? How do I want to show up in the space that is authentic, but in keeping with my, and keeps me effective in the space that allows me to have a neutral mindset when it's necessary. These are things that we do well ahead of coming into a conflict space, right? Or coming to a space where there needs to be some mediation. So yeah, no, we buy this insurance ahead of time, right? Because we know that we'll need it, right? We know that it'll be important for us. So cool. Any other things you would add or augment or talk about that? Donna, anything you see?
This is interesting. So I haven't thought about ground rules per se for mediators. Now, when I'm presenting ground rules for the parties, I would include speak for yourself only, rather than saying, oh, blah, 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 and I think this way. It's like, just speak for yourself only and not go into the have this opinion.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting, as a mediator, we don't even go there.
Yep. So when you say, Donna, we don't go there, what do you mean by that? So say more about that.
We're not, as a neutral, we don't present our opinions. We do not speak as we do not speak as we don't even go there. Whereas the parties will say, I want this, blah, 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 and when these agreements like focus your attention on the goals, well, what are your goals as a mediator for the mediation? So there is no there is no we.
Yeah.
And so this is a new thinking for me.
Yeah. So the other thing I do want to say is, like, and this is part of the challenge of our space, of our community, right? So there are, so being a neutral oftentimes can be different than being a mediator. And being in the restorative justice circles might be different than mediation, that also might be different than being a neutral, right? And so, and I think that's the importance of looking at those goals, right? I think that's important as we talk about that, because sometimes in the restorative justice processes that I've been a part of, I've had to be the I. So a number of the mediations that I've done have been around young people stealing from Target. And as opposed to prosecuting them, Target wants them to go through this mediation process. So I am the I am Target, right? And so, but that I have to recognize the context of that mediation. And when I go into two community members, there's a tree dropping too many leaves on my lawn, I'm tired of it, I have to take a different, the context matters. So no, wonderful concepts. Lonnie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, sorry I'm late.
Oh, no. Anytime. We were just going over the ground rules and just kind of talking about how those can be helpful in helping us to to be effective as practitioners, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about the folks we work with who are in conflict, but we wanted to spend a little time talking about what some ground rules might be for us. And so now I'm going to move on to kind of talking about or leading us into this conversation. And it doesn't have to be long. I don't really have a presentation on this, but given that we just had the drawdown of troops and removal of troops from Afghanistan. Tomorrow is 9/11. Someone just hit me up in chat. Let's see, what's this? Okay, that's great. We come and go as we need to, but this reflection on 9/11 or 9/11. So, do folks recall where they were at the time of the towers coming down? And do you mind sharing where you were?
Absolutely. I was about to start a golf tournament in Coon Rapids for the city of Coon Rapids.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful that you can remember it, not wonderful.
Oh yeah, that's no problem.
Sorry, no.
Yeah, I remember where I was. I was on my way. I was working at University of North Dakota at the time, and on my way to meeting with the president of the university on fundraising and stuff like that. And he got a call from his wife because his son was working at the Pentagon at the time as a reporter and was really worried. And it was interesting because we were all kind of feeling like we were freaking out a little bit, at least internally, but he didn't know what to do. He was like, do I go to the meeting? And I said, hey, we can turn around. We don't have to do this. And he said, no, we're going to the meeting. And we got there and we started walking in. He said, I think I need to leave. And I said, just go. I'll find a ride home. I don't think we're going to have a meeting anyway. And then when I got back to the office, we must have sat till about 7, 8 o'clock at night together around a computer, just watching things unfold. Like I remember it vividly. Yeah.
Anybody else want to share where they were? Or
I was home. I decided not to go to the sales meeting, so I turned on the TV to the Today Show, and I watched the second tower go down in real time. I had just come home the day before from Toronto from my father-in-law's funeral with my son, and he watched it he was in high school, and he watched it at school. We were supposed to fly on 9/11.
wow.
But my daughter had said, no, I can't. I have to go back to Boston on 9/10. So we flew on 9/10 instead of 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So my husband was stuck in Canada because they closed all the borders. My sister-in-law was stuck in Canada because they closed all the airports. We were lucky we got home. And on the day before, I had gotten a call that one of the houses I sold, there was a fire there. And so as soon as I got off the airplane, I took my customer to see the house. And then so the next morning on 9/11, I was tired. I'm not going to the sales meeting. I turned on the TV and I watched the second tower go down. So
yeah, so that morning, so I taught high school and middle school, and that morning we were in our first hour class. I mean, this is one of those I heard my parents talk about, like, I remember where I was when JFK was, and as a kid, you don't really get the gravity of it. But like, I remember that particular day so clearly. And so I taught social studies, and we're we're doing our lesson, and I don't remember exactly what the curriculum is. I could find out because I have it mapped out, right? So after all these years, and so we're in a social studies class, and one of the administrators came in and said, they hit one of the towers. I was like, what are you talking about? They hit one of the towers. And so we had TVs in our classroom. So we turned on the TV in our classroom, and, you know, there was lots of chaos in the news, and people didn't know what was going on. And it was the Today Show as well. And as I'm trying to explain this to my students, also trying to process it myself, and the eeriness of it, because it was just absolutely eerie. We see the second plane fly into the second building, and it was, even now I'm getting emotional, so forgive me if I, but I knew that I knew that the world would never be the same. And it was that moment that, you know, how you feel, or at least I'll speak for me. There have been times when I felt very naive about things, and then I find out how the harsh reality of things. It felt like that. It felt like my innocence or my naivete was taken, and yeah, and that the world would never be the same. And unfortunately, I've been absolutely right that since that day, the world has never been the same, you know? So
Yeah,
just
mediation.
interesting. So
Oh, okay.
You leaving?
Mowing,
Nice.
mowing or less.
so thank you for letting me be vulnerable. Other thoughts. So you know, my prediction that the world would never be the same. I didn't know what it would be. So how do you think how did 9/11 like change even the nature of talking about commonalities and differences? How do you think that impacted us today?
I'm not sure if that was the start of the deep division in the United States, but certainly that was part of that action. And I don't know why that was so, but we've never been the same since that division has come about.
So say more about that division, because where I was
Well,
coming from, people were all like, you know, let's get together. You know, this is a common tragedy. So where do you think the division popped in?
I don't know about the coming together at all, because I didn't see it. What I saw after that was a huge division between conservatives and liberals, and that has continued and strengthened to this day. And I don't know that 9/11 had a lot to do with it or not. I just don't know that.
Okay.
All I know is what I know, what is happening today.
Right.
It's very
Right.
destructive.
Absolutely. Right. We can't seem to agree on anything.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Right. Other thoughts?
Let me ask the other two mediators, have you found it more difficult mediating recently, let's say in the last 3 or 4 years, than you did before? Are people more hostile? Are they less willing to compromise and agree? Or what are you finding? Nothing?
Actually, I'm finding we do come to agreements. People are agreeable. It's as long as they feel listened to. But I haven't done a lot of mediation. I just did one restorative justice with 9 people, or restorative practice. So, but I always approach it as a neutral, whether it's restorative or mediation. So, yeah, they were able to come together. That was a big group.
Good.
So
That's good.
I don't think I've seen a difference that much in, you know, sort of the small group mediation, 2 people, 3 people, that sort of thing. But I have seen it more in polarized discussions that involve, you know, let's just take COVID out of the whole thing, because of course that's polarizing now. But political discussion or ideological discussions seem to be much more difficult to even be able to talk about, let alone find common ground.
Mhm. I've really only done in the last year or so. I was doing conciliation work in the court system, and then of course the courts closed down. And so I've been doing some housing issues, landlords and tenants. Other than that, between now and that incident on 9/11, I really didn't either. I thought we would find it more difficult. I did not see that to be true. Can't hear you. There you go.
I think it's interesting that when people have to confront issues on a one-on-one basis, that they're more likely to come to a resolution and be reasonable, right, than they are when there is a mob mentality, right? So it's funny to have watched some of these city council meetings or you know, these people post things on social media, and they feel like they have this mob behind them. But if you talk to them one-on-one, they actually are quite reasonable. But it's something about having the support
True.
that makes coming to resolution oftentimes difficult.
That can happen.
Yeah.
So in some of those situations, some people get off on creating conflict for the energy it generates. And they do it on purpose.
Yes.
Because they're sucking up all that energy. And we see that in the mob.
Sometimes the conflict is what they live for. And
Mhm.
they'd rather have a conflict than have nothing, because the conflict is their day. That's what they live for, their day. And so when you see a situation like that, you might as well shut it down, because it ain't going to work.
Yep.
They're happy with what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, and that, you know, that's one of the I was sharing that I subscribe to, follow a number of philosophies, one of which is Adlerian, Alfred Adler's philosophy, and one of the things that he says, if something is working for someone, you can't change it, right?
Good point. Good
right
point.
so you know, that's why it's important to come back to these goals around what do you want to get out of this, like why are we, you know. And it's funny when I'm working with students who or young people who have, like, you know, stolen from Target as an example, and I'm like, did you get what you wanted? And their first answer always is yes. And then I talk about all the collateral things that occurred because they did what they did, right? So you wanted your mom to take off from work, you wanted your dad to be angry at you, you wanted to be on, that was all part of your grand plan. And once you walk them down that road, they come to their senses and say, no, that's not, you know. And ultimately it wasn't worth it. And part of it is the nature of the conversation. That's where we want to get them, right? But yeah, important stuff. But yeah.
I want to make another comment about 9/11. So I was alive for JFK's, and I was alive with the when that rocket with the teachers and
Oh yeah.
that exploded. So they were all so memorable. I think everybody remembers where they were when those events happen. It was
True.
not just 9/11.
Mhm.
It's so it's like, how are we affected by these huge events? Is it our world changed, or our personal world changed, or did it expand our world?
Yes. All of it.
Yes to all of it, huh?
Yes to all of it. Right. And here's the thing that it doesn't take, we should be having paradigm shifts like that all the time. It shouldn't be these big things, right? So as outraged as people were about 9/11, we should also be, and this is the other thing. So there are lots of things happening all the time that we should be outraged on, or about, or pay attention to. But for whatever reason, we don't. And mostly because we can't as human beings. I mean, we can only, we only recognize that we can process cognitively so much information. We're sucking up information all the time. We're using all sorts of our brains parts, in ways that people don't even know, right? From, well, I won't go as far as to say we have telepathy, but I think our sixth senses, right? Those things that we don't have words for, about how we sense others' presence and laughter and all this stuff. And so we shut a lot of stuff down until these big things rattle our cages and say, wake up. And then we wake up to what we think is a new reality, but it was there all along, So, but yeah, I think it's important to recognize that, it was all of those things. We expanded, the world changed, our understanding of the global impact shifted, and so as mediators, we have to kind of keep this these lessons in the front of our mind. So if we have one call to action, if we had to kind of think about, like, what are the next steps, what should we be doing next given our conversation, what do you think that call to action should be?
I don't know where you're going, Andre.
So all the only place I want to go is kind of given what we've talked about in terms of conflict, that we do. There seems to be a recognition in this call that large groups trying to navigate conflict is more difficult than one-on-one, or in small groups navigating conflict. That we can have these paradigm shifts that don't require these kind of life-changing pieces. What should we take about what we've learned from 9/11?
Is to, I think, to raise our awareness of all the signals out there. I mean, it didn't come in a vacuum. So it's just to, how do we raise our awareness, or our empathy? We can use our empathy to also understand that the conflict is escalating. And then how do we use our empathy to calm the escalation down? So there can be a dialogue, a resolution. Rather, we can always stop a conflict with authoritarian. No, you can't. But that's only a stopgap. But so it's to be able to, I think that, are there trainings to raise our awareness of signals? That something is kind of, the temperature in the room is rising, and are there escalating techniques for us to be able to allow the atmosphere to shift so where dialogue can happen.
I like that. This seems like a really great call to action.
Well, I think, Donna, the in-person mediations have almost gone away, which is too bad, because having that ability to look at people and see what their body language is and listen to their voices is very important to help them determine how this conflict is going to go away. And right now, you know, all we've got is to have that that artificial medium of a Zoom, which is not nearly as well as being in person. And so it's not as productive as it has been if you were in person.
So the quality has shifted, but there are more mediations now because of Zoom.
I don't know.
It has the local mediation community MCS's numbers have gone up. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights numbers have gone up. It's because people can still connect over the internet or by phone, because they don't have to get into a car, they don't have to get and travel to like 80 miles to some place to be able to be in the same room. So and the quality may not be as good as when we were in the same room, but the number has gone up. So the quantity, so it's kind of like, do you want more mediations to happen, or do you want the better mediation to happen?
Yeah. So, and these are conversations that we'll continue to kind of have and wrestle with and develop some strategies around. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us in these calls. We've got some key takeaways from this, and I'm really excited about what we'll be able to do. So this actually is going to end our time this week, and I will see you next week. And hopefully the community in this space will continue to grow, and we'll put out a schedule so folks know what we'll be talking about in the next coming weeks. And so I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your commitment to mediation and to our communities, because none of us are doing this to get rich. I know that I do it because it's a calling of mine to be in this space. So just want to say thank you so much for being here, and look forward to seeing who we become in this community. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Andre.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.